All right, recruits. I hope you are ready for this. Give a hand for your chief drill instructor and chief orange pillar, Dennis Porter.
Listen here, recruit. You are nothing, but I will shape and mold you into something. By the end of this course, you will understand thermodynamics, which podcast to listen to, and how to be a man. We will discuss how to orange pill people in the days ahead. I will teach you how to properly boost people on Fountain. Won't touch Noster because that's gay. But most importantly, which headphones to purchase for the best podcast listening experience. Some may say life is more than listening to podcasts and reading breaking tweets. Those people are weak. Podcasting is a part of the American dream, a world where humble people like me can climb their ways to places of influence. Bitcoin podcast listeners are like the pioneers of early America, heading west in search for gold and adventure.
Now slow down there, Dennis. You don't want to get them too excited on the first day.
Yeah, seriously, Dennis. They're all popping boners in their pants. Too bad Dieter isn't here so we could all see how small his erect penis is.
All right, I'll wrap this up. The Bugle has assembled a crack team of the world's best orange pillars to teach you recruits on how to listen to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week. The world changes not just by doing, but also listening. We want to prepare the next generation of orange berets to protect America's security. By the end of these few weeks, you will be well on your way. Well, quit standing around. Let's get to it.
You heard Dennis Porter. Scram before I kick your ass.
The Bugle Podcast Listening Bootcamp will be taking more recruits soon. We have sold out and will be expanding how many recruits we can take at a time. Keep an eye out, but more importantly, listen to podcasts to hear when enrollment opens for the next course. This is Chief Drill Sergeant Dennis Porter. Come see if you have what it takes to be an elite podcast listener.
I'm so excited to be helping run the podcast Listener Bootcamp. Have you been listening to your 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week? Stay tuned to hear when we will be running our next course. I promise you, getting orange pilled by Dennis will be much more fulfilling than Breedlove's Alpha Camp. We had a wonderful private late-night orange pilling session over the weekend. You are about to listen to the most thermodynamically sound duo in the world of journalism. It's Uptober and not time to be a gay bear. If you're feeling gay, it's probably because you haven't listened to enough Bitcoin podcasts or smoked enough cigarettes. We are about to change that. Get ready for some credentialed price predictions and expert analysis of the most important topics. If you are driving while listening to this podcast, make sure to unbuckle your seatbelt and pour yourself a glass of whiskey. This is Kaylee Welch, and you are listening to the Bugle Weekly, the most credentialed Bitcoin podcast in the world.
Welcome to the Bugle Weekly. This is your co-host, Richard Greaser, with Rod Palmer joining me from the Bugle podcast studio. We got Kaylee producing the show. This is going to be, very big episode. We had some very important and exciting news stories that happened this week. Natalie Brunell got married to Sam Callahan. HBO put out their documentary that a lot of people have been arguing about. They named Satoshi. That might be that might create a geopolitical conflict, and of course, we're just going to continue to cover hyper Bitcoinization and the fact that Bitcoin has already won, pointing to examples of where that's happening. But how you doing today, Rod? What's going on?
Dude, super glad to be here. And I mean, you said it is not to be bullish right now. We're almost in the middle of October. And just last week, not only did we learn who Satoshi was, MicroStrategy hit an all-time high. MicroStrategy stock is going through the roof. And I don't know what there were some people think there's a short squeeze, something, the hedge fund that was shorting Michael Saylor and fading his bet. I think that it blew out. Other people think that the market is sniffing out the fact that Bitcoin has already won. Donald Trump is launching that shit coin on Tuesday. You mentioned it, the Orange Wedding, which was the social event of the year. It was, unfortunately, Pacific Bitcoin was supposed to happen next week. This was supposed to be like the kickoff event to Pacific Bitcoin. Unfortunately, we lost Pacific Bitcoin, but we didn't lose the Orange Wedding. Michael Saylor was there. It was a real who's who of Bitcoin podcasting at that wedding. And we're excited to see more about that. But yeah, the mood is high, and it's time to lock in.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are really upset with Tether for having taken Pacific Bitcoin from us. There were a lot of people that were really excited. But yeah, for anybody that, our listeners might not understand the importance of this moment of Sam and Natalie getting married in the way that they did at this kind of point in Bitcoin history. But for people that are in the know, that are in the industry, that listen to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week, and go to Bitcoin meetups and try an orange pill, everybody that they talk to. This is kind of like the equivalent of like a royal wedding.
Yeah, exactly. This is Bitcoin's royal wedding. This is like the celebrities, the elite, the aristocracy of Bitcoin was there.
Yeah, and it's exciting. They recorded the wedding. They put it out on podcasting platforms. This is actually, I think, the first notable case of a wedding being turned into a podcast and being boostable.
I love it. I love the idea. I was told that at the wedding reception, all the front tables, that was the whale pass section. So the whales, all the top podcasters were at the front. But at a table, they were the first, to get to dancing, go to the buffet. There was at one point, part of the wedding ceremony itself, in lieu of lighting candles, which is, kind of the traditional Christian Western, ritual at a wedding, they consolidated their UTXOs into one giant UTXO. It's like a symbol, on-chain symbol of their unity. And put it into a two multi-sig wallet. There's all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, yeah, James Lavish was there. Lynn Alden was actually showing her ear that's usually hidden. In the pictures I saw, you had, Michael Saylor was there. I already mentioned that. His handler, Eric Weiss, was there. It was, the pictures there. It was beautiful. But Swenson, I was feeling FOMO, I'll tell you that. The panel with Lynn Holden about the history of money in lieu of the best man speech. I mean, wow. So I was looking at the pictures and it looked like the ideal ratio that you could, imagine in your mind. If you're getting married, you want about 25, 30 Bitcoin podcasters for every, family member that doesn't listen to you when you try to orange pill them. You want the people closest to you. That's what it looked like the ratio was there. So, my question was like, how many people did they orange pill just with the wedding itself? They had a huge Bitcoin cake. But I'm sure anybody who was there was a no coiner. It's probably not anymore. By the end of the reception, it was a room full of only Bitcoiners.
I mean, how much do you think the bartender got tipped in Bitcoin?
So I'm like, God, especially with the open bar, you will start getting drunk. Because I know when I'm like, if you're trying to sell me something and you're using USDT, I'm like, $8, that's kind of an expensive cheeseburger for what it is. But if you show me a t-shirt for 50,000 cents, I'm like, that sounds like a deal to me. I think I got 50,000 cents. Here you go.
Well, yeah, like a lot of these weddings, they tend to onboard the wait staff to using some sort of custodial Lightning wallet, right? For ease of use. Because, like, if you've ever attempted to, set somebody up kind of in a more sovereign manner using the Lightning network, it's very common for, you to be trying to do a demo and orange pill somebody and then for the payment to fail, right?
Right.
But the type of crowd that we're talking about that was at this wedding, they're not dicking around with little custodial Lightning payments. They're sending, large on-chain transactions.
Like these people are, they were, actively managing their Lightning liquidity during the ceremony. You know what I mean? That's why they didn't even ask people to put their phones away.
Yeah. Like, you know, the people that went to like Epstein parties or P. Diddy parties, you know, the level of wealth that you're dealing with is
That's
just
why
like
Max Kaiser, somebody like Max Kaiser.
Yeah.
He had that kind of wealth, is what I mean.
Yeah. Like, you think, you know, you go to a Diddy party, like, money is just like a joke to these people. They have so much. But, like, you go to a Natalie Brunell wedding, and these people have so much Bitcoin. Like, they're rolling in intergenerational wealth.
Right, exactly. That's a good point. So I remember when I was a kid, you know, inflation since the 90s really took hold. But you would see a rap of large. It's a rich person just kind of throwing $100 bills around like it was nothing, and it was just hard to grasp. But it's like you might see somebody at the Orange wedding, and they might just be flipping a literal whole coin, you know, just for fun. You know, heads or tails. The whole coin. Here's your thanks for the Michelob Ultra.
Yeah.
I got hundreds more of these.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty monumental moment. You know, these two things happening. You know, we're about to get a Bitcoiner elected into being in charge of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't. One more thought on the Orange weddings. I can't think about a better way to incentivize some of your family, extended family and friends to become orange pilled is to have like the coolest Bitcoin podcast / conference of a wedding that's like the talk of the timeline. And you didn't get invited, even though you're like, you know, you grew up together. You were best friends until middle school. If you would have listened to it and when they tried to orange pill you and you were a Bitcoiner, you would have been invited. So it's like, I'm not going to miss the next one. I'm not missing the next Bitcoin conference wedding.
Yeah, I'm surprised that that Donald Trump didn't get invited to the wedding.
Yeah, that's. I hope he doesn't feel slighted.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't feel slighted. I mean, it might have been, you know, because do you think it's okay if I talk about having doubts about Donald Trump being a Bitcoiner? Is that, I know PodConf won't appreciate that type of talk, but
well, I think it's safe to do that. I think it's a very real concern because, in my opinion, I'm just speculating. I have no evidence. I think this wedding was really just probably exemplified the values of Bitcoin, not crypto. And Donald Trump is a Bitcoin and crypto type of person.
Yeah, it's I know Predator's been doing some really great work covering this topic and documenting all the cases of shitcoining that the former president has been involved with, and it's just, you know, it kind of makes me feel bearish on America because, you know, America historically, the reason why it's been so powerful is because we as a nation have not shitcoined.
Yeah. Do you think that people are giving Donald Trump a pass? They wouldn't give a plan otherwise because of his promise to help them pay their taxes?
That could be part of it. I mean, I think the problem here is so many people are just so tied to NGU and tied to, you know, the pillars of upon which PodConf stands, that they're willing to compromise any sort of morals that they have.
Right.
It's almost like when a lot of these individuals in the space, when they're looking at which political candidate they're looking to support, they almost have the same level of scrutiny as Peter McCormick does when he's choosing sponsors for his show.
Right. And you have to think, you have to have some principles in this situation. Think about this. You would not trust your children. You would not trust your health you would not trust your family's safety in the hands of somebody who doesn't listen to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week. Why would you trust your country?
Yeah, I mean, do you seriously want somebody to have the nuclear codes that doesn't listen to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week and just like blatantly shows it? Like nobody that listens to the adequate amount of podcasts to even be remotely interesting, to have the level of understanding of the world that you need to even be a sentient being.
Right. I think the problem, or part of it, is that we keep hiring or selecting politicians with high time preference. It's time we let somebody with low time preference take over. It's time to kind of shift the pendulum to a lower time preference group of leaders.
Well, what's interesting about Donald Trump is compared to like a good portion. Well, I don't know. I mean, you could argue that Joe Biden has low time preference when it comes to his family, right? Like he has really done a good job of mentoring Hunter into being an effective businessman in the way that he has, his whole career.
Right. Most people are selling Bitcoin to be able to afford to pay their taxes to Ukraine. And Hunter Biden is actually getting tax money from Ukraine so much that he can pay his taxes. He just forgot to, but he can afford to pay them.
Well, I would argue that actually Hunter has historically lowered American tax burdens. Like we've had to pay less taxes to support Ukraine because of all the revenue he's generated, taxable revenue he's generated in that country through his savvy business skills.
Right. He's just, is he perfect? Of course not. Do you know anybody that's perfect? Because I don't.
I mean, I would argue Dennis Porter is probably about as close as perfect.
Well, it goes without saying, of course. I'm not talking about regular people. And so he's not perfect, but if you go after him, you're going to harm the economy. You're going to cost people jobs. I mean, do you really want to be the person that has to look your children, your community in the face and say that your personal grudges against Hunter Biden were worth tens of thousands of unemployed Ukrainians? Like, they need our help. They need our support.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really important to, kind of cover inconvenient truths up for national security. And, this is like one of the roles that like journalists play, in as, being also a Bitcoin podcaster. What a lot of Bitcoin podcasters need to understand is that credentialed universities around the country are probably going to be giving them honorary degrees.
Right. A lot of people, they like to talk about the value of privacy, but they all wanted to see Hunter Biden's laptop. That's just total hypocrisy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obvious that, a lot of these people like Hunter Biden, they benefit from Bitcoin meetups. They benefit from going and learning, the basics of how to operate hardware securely, right? Like there's no reason why he shouldn't have been running his, having encryption on his laptop, like using a program like VeriCrypt to encrypt his hard drive so that the computer repair technician couldn't see all of his private communications. And, that's one of the exciting things that, we'll probably see here in the near future is like, I wouldn't be surprised if, Hunter Biden was seen at a Bitcoin meetup here pretty soon, or somebody like, Donald Trump Jr. These various.
Think about this. How much value, how much benefit, I don't really benefit more, right? Honestly, than Hunter Biden from Bitcoin and being orange pill. Look at what it did for RFK Jr. RFK Jr. was an alcoholic. He was a sex addict. He was cheating on all of his wives. He was an environmentalist. He was, he sawed a head off a whale. He chopped a dead bear off because he was hammered drunk. He was the embarrassment of his family up until just 2 years ago. And then David Bailey orange pills him. And in 2 years, he has become he's not a podcaster himself, but in 2024, he is the most, if not the most, maybe the second most downloaded podcaster, like podcast guest in all the podcasting community, especially Bitcoin podcast. And he is, 3 weeks away from then becoming the head of health advice for the entire United States of America. If that is not an orange pill success story, I don't know what is. If he could work for RFK Jr. in his, 60s, 70s, what could it do for your life if you're like Dylan LeClaire's age? I mean, well, you can see what it would do. Dylan LeClaire is now running Japanese MicroStrategy. He's not even 25 years old.
Yeah. I mean, the Bitcoin podcasters have to realize, like, what the future holds for them is being featured in HBO documentaries and, essentially being honored as, visionaries of their times. It's going to be bigger than just getting invited to conferences to talk. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable to think, like, in 2028, when Dennis Porter wins the presidency, that we're going to see, lots of podcasters at the inauguration, or even leading up to the DNC when Dennis, wins the nomination. And we have to be thinking of, like, how do we position ourselves for this point? And, like, one of the fears that I have about this whole phenomenon is that, like, PodConf is really going to take over and sink their fangs in and have an outsized amount of influence.
That's gonna be an adjustment we're gonna have to make, because we are used to kind of coalescing around fighting fun, and telling the legacy media to have fun staying poor. But podcasts they are more difficult to convince, especially noobs, that they're full of shit, and they're very influential to the mass majority.
Yeah, which is kind of why it's important to, be the contrarian at the meetup. Like, who do you want Hunter Biden's first impression, when, like, you can either have Hunter Biden come into the meetup and get onboarded to using Coinbase, or you could be the one onboarding him to use Sparrow Wallet. And
that's a really good point. As we continue to accelerate, as Bitcoin becomes bigger, as more people realize that it is already won, they are going to start looking for Bitcoin meetups, and they are going to have maybe not an experience majority, but a numbers majority. And there's going to be a lot of people, they have a product to sell. They have a product to shill. They have a podcast with sponsors who they have to make sales for. They're, like you said, they're going to onboard them onto Coinbase instead of Sparrow. Your job going to a Bitcoin meetup, whether you have one that you go to every week or you're going to go to a new one, your job is not to be there to make friends. It's not to build these buddy relationships where you just watch college football and get drunk. Your job is to transact adversarially. Your job is to be, your job is to be the predator at your meetup. You want to be the predator of your meetup. You want to make sure everybody is Bitcoin, not crypto, shitcoinery, ordinals apology, and keep people on their P's and Q's.
100%.
When in doubt, be the predator of your local Bitcoin community, of your family.
The world needs more predators. I mean, I don't think people understand how lucrative, the future Like they think that the skills that they've been learning over the years when listening to all these podcasts aren't going to translate to anything. But when you're podcasting and you're being noticed as kind of like a influential person in the industry, we're gonna, I don't think people understand that, BlackRock doing this ETF and all these, big financial institution behemoths that have been pillars in the industry for decades, are embracing Bitcoin. Like what that means from like,
yeah, this
we
is
have the potential. Yeah. Like Hillary Clinton has made millions of dollars traveling and speaking at universities. Just like she's not orange pilling people because she's
right.
She's kind of
I think or from my point of view, we have to look at this, and it kind of goes into our next subject here, which is the HBO documentary about Satoshi. So I'll start with that. So when I'm watching that documentary, and it's trying to tell me what I know, which is, hey, that Peter Todd is not Satoshi. But as I'm watching it with my friends, they haven't listened to nearly as many Bitcoin podcasts as me, so they're a lot more susceptible to the programming or the agenda of the documentary of the filmmaker. And as I'm watching it, I'm immediately starting to realize it's a problem because, I'm 30 or 40 minutes in, and I'm realizing this HBO Watch has listened to more Bitcoin podcasts than most people to make this documentary. And they're explaining it really well. My friend's like, you've been trying to orange pill me for 2.5 years, and he just explained it. HBO just explained it in 20 minutes better than you have in 2 years. This is actually pretty cool. I'm interested in this. If you if you're like the only podcaster at your meetup, you're going to be looked up to. People are going to see you as like an influential authority. And if somebody like BlackRock shows up, or a Fed, or some company who's got nefarious motives, and they're listening to more Bitcoin podcasts than you, and they can explain Bitcoin better than you, and they make it more easy to use and accessible than you, well, whatever they're selling, your friends and your community is going to buy because they're better salesmen, they're better orange pillars than you. And the last thing you want to do is be a king of the king orange pillar of your community, and it's like getting fired as the CEO of the company you founded. He founded a Bitcoin meetup, and then BlackRock takes over and becomes the president. That's a risk.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I have, I found the documentary enjoyable. I think they did a good job of orange pilling the viewer, but I was, surprised that one, there was, they talked about El Salvador, and yet again, this is just an example of another media source that refuses to acknowledge how North Korea has embraced Bitcoin and was the original Bitcoin country, and Kim Jong-un was the original Bitcoin president. I think probably some of that had to do with Samson Mao's influence. It was interesting, because like last episode we talked about how Blockstream was using the documentary as kind of a native marketing attempt to get Adam back seen as Satoshi. And while that a lot of that happened, and I think people are looking at Liquid a little bit more seriously after viewing this.
Yeah, I saw something that their website, like download or visits went from like 14 or 15 a day, and it was almost 100 a day for the first week, since the documentary came out.
Yeah. While that happened, I'm kind of curious if there was a geopolitical strategy here to try and destabilize North Korea. And that's why, like, potentially the CIA wants people to believe that Peter Todd is Satoshi to, like, try and take credit for Bitcoin as a way to undermine Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. And here's why I agree with you, or why I think that I agree with this theory. Because there's a lot of Ukraine connections. So why did, the big, destabilizing force in foreign policy for the past few years. And, kind of the what kicked off, the beginning of the bear market, the beginning of Bitcoin crashing in early 2022 was Ukraine instigating Russia into attacking. And then, Peter Todd's very vocal. He's been in Ukraine a lot of this year. Who knows what he's doing, who he's working with, but there's a lot of Bitcoin in Ukraine. Now, a connection with Peter Todd is trying to instigate North Korea into invading South Korea.
Yeah.
And who knows what's going to come from that.
Yeah, I mean, we're in very precarious times, and I don't think HBO realized how much they were playing with fire, or maybe they did. But the last time that, Hollywood kind of got involved with the affairs of North Korea, it ended up in some pretty massive cyber attacks that were disruptive for, companies like Sony. And this one seems to be a little bit worse than the way that they portrayed Un, and I forgot what the movie was called that Sony did.
The something leader or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, Un for decades now has been telling the people of North Korea that he indeed was Satoshi. That he's solved the Byzantine general's problem, and the double spend problem. And the North Korean people have been utilizing Bitcoin under the assumption that that's true, that they can trust it. And North Koreans have a very deep trust from Western intelligence agencies, as a result of, their experience with America during the Korean War.
Yeah. I think all of that is part of what I would simplify it down to is North Koreans under Kim Jong-un have been told that since the Korean War armistice, that he is, not only is he Satoshi, but since the Korean War armistice, North Korea controls 51% of the Korean Peninsula. And at the 38th parallel, the border between the two countries is situated such that exactly 51% of the land of the Korean Peninsula is north of that line. In fact, it's not true. It's actually the other way. South Korea has 51% control. And now they find this out, along with the fact that Kim Jong-un is not the most respected cypherpunk of all time. And now the hackers that have been following this, they thought was Satoshi, becoming some of the best hackers and intelligence evaders and CIA, mercenaries. Now they're questioning everything, and things are just breaking apart at the seams. They essentially, he's desperate. He made a desperate move because he's desperate to maintain power.
Yeah. I mean, what would be really scary is if he actually is Satoshi and if he moved his coins, how detrimental that could be.
Right. What if he just decides to launch a giant transaction to sell 1 million Bitcoin at once? Like, the whole world could be brought to its knees. He's threatened to do things that would disrupt commerce and make the economy at risk in the past. He's he's threatened to even use missiles to disrupt the economy. He has the doomsday button. All he has to do is sign the transaction and broadcast it from his node.
Yeah. I mean, what we're talking about here is we're talking about a guy that understands Bitcoin. He understands game theory. He has used Bitcoin for a long time. He has trained his citizenry to be some of the most effective cypherpunks in the world, that are very knowledgeable on using Bitcoin. And he also is vindictive like Craig Wright is. And so, Craig Wright essentially attempted to kind of neuter and take over the Bitcoin podcast industry through, lawsuits over people that, deny that he was Satoshi and might be willing to launch nuclear weapons or invade South Korea. So it's incredible the amount of geopolitics, the level of geopolitics that, is at play here, that a Bitcoin documentary could have the ability to destabilize an entire region, if not the world.
Yeah. Well, despite the potential underlying psyop behind making that documentary, it was honestly, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's worth watching. The only other complaint that we haven't talked about yet that I have about that is, I thought people would have learned after Vlad Kostia had Roger Ver on his podcast. Roger Ver is a scammer. I'm disappointed that the documentary filmmaker for HBO, Colin Hallback, disappointed that he platformed Roger Ver. But I am glad that he at least noted that Roger Ver is in jail for his scams now. But I just wish he wouldn't have had it on there at all.
Well, that was like a really interesting thing to even include him in the documentary, and I'm kind of glad that they did, because people need to see that even OG Bitcoiners can have trouble affording their taxes.
Right.
Like that's it's kind of like shocking.
Yeah, Bitcoin faces not being able to afford the taxes, and but as an asterisk, it's if you manage it wisely. And I'm glad that they did also, I would add, because it's important for people who are unfamiliar with the space to understand how annoying and whiny shitcoiners are. And I think Roger Ver is a great example of that.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, most religions, struggle with false prophets, right? And you kind of need somebody to exist to ensure there's like an effective canon. And while, Roger Ver was, played an important role in, Bitcoin's history, he is what I would identify as a false prophet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows that in Bitcoin, if it was Christianity, that Jesus was Satoshi. He made the ultimate sacrifice of destroying his self, his ego, and his keys. But Roger Ver claimed to be Bitcoin Jesus, and it really turned out to be, well, it depends. Some people think that Satoshi is Adam back. Roger Ver tried to stab the small blockers in Blockstream in the back with Bitcoin Cash. So, ironically, and I'm not the first person to say this, but Roger Ver's actually Bitcoin Judas.
I agree.
Do you think that there is? What percentage would you put at the, possibility that Peter Kahn is Satoshi and that the documentary was onto it, and even if not perfectly correct, they were close?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of people struggle with the idea of Peter Todd being Satoshi. I think it's in the realm of possibility, but I think it's kind of unlikely. And the reason why I believe this is because I've listened to so many Bitcoin podcasts, and that's what everybody on the Bitcoin podcast, says. But I think the community at large is pretty concerned that this could be true, because it would mean that Satoshi wasn't as based as we thought he was, which is kind of concerning because, unfortunately, Peter Todd is not that based. Like, he doesn't.
Right.
He doesn't really.
There's a lot of things or flaws that I think if people found out that Satoshi had, they could forgive them. Because like I said earlier, nobody's perfect. And if Satoshi was cringe, that would be kind of a letdown.
Yeah. I mean, I think, this isn't hyperbolic to kind of compare RBF to abortion, because you're essentially aborting your Bitcoin transaction, and like a lot of Bitcoiners consider, a valid transaction from inception. Like
Right, exactly.
the second that it goes into the mempool.
Yeah, John Carvalho is a great example. He fought very hard against RBF because, like you said, a transaction begins at broadcast.
Yeah.
And, I can see like a scenario where maybe I fucked something up and I spent all my Bitcoin because I fat fingered something. And my life would be ruined if I accidentally gave up all my, or like made all of the transaction fee, like all the rest of my Bitcoin. Like if I noticed that with like in the first 10 seconds or the first few minutes, I could replace that fee. I could abort that transaction. Okay. But if it's on everybody's node, it's almost about to be encoded into a block. It's in the template. Somebody is close to, a pool is close to fucking finding that nonce. And right at the last second, right before it's confirmed, you decide to terminate the transaction. I don't know if I find that to be ethical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, abortion's one of the most controversial topics in America right now. People are finding it's gonna swing their election vote probably more than Bitcoin will, which
Right.
is
Right. I mean, if you're not sure how to feel about it, just find work devs who share your values. Like Luke Dash, he is Catholic, but he supports transaction abortion. So, like, find somebody and learn their position, and but make your own, do your own research, but make your own conclusions.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's some pretty interesting stuff that was covered, and I think the fact that HBO is reporting on it at all just shows that Bitcoin has won. But I think one of the key takeaways that I took from the documentary was that they seem to portray Bitcoin podcast listeners as cool. And we're starting to see that, with the Orange Wedding, with, these monumental kind of shifts with the HBO documentary, we're starting to see that Bitcoin podcast listeners are no longer the ones that people make fun of at the parties. They're not the people that people make jokes about being annoying or talking about Bitcoin too much. They're starting to listen because they're starting to see, Bitcoin really is the future.
Exactly.
Like, on Jeopardy, people are they're not going to go for bitches in the future. They're going to understand Bitcoin is the future.
I like that.
Well, the Trump family is kind of a confusing one to me. In some ways they're based, especially Don Jr. He's really taken it upon himself to try and, be the most based of the Trump family. We're seeing them, like Donald Trump, kind of trying to operate in a dynastic manner. Like he's trying to set up his kids for success. He's trying to make sure they don't turn into fail sons. And in that way, he seems to have very low time preference, but at the same time, he's launching shitcoins.
It's like hot and cold, mixed messages. One day he can say nothing wrong. The next day he can say nothing right. And some people get, ahead of themselves. They're tempted and they fall for, a good day, and they kind of tie their identity to supporting him. And then he embarrasses them with shitcoins the next day.
Well, I've got a theory on it, which is, Donald Trump has been a real estate mogul his whole life. And, as a full-time podcast listener, our audience will understand that real estate's a shitcoin.
Right.
So he made his enormous wealth shitcoining, and he's figured out what Bitcoin is. He's trying to set up his family for intergenerational wealth, but like realistically, the only valuable skill set that he has is shitcoin.
Right.
And so I wonder if
Yeah.
him launching these tokens and being involved in with the shitcoining is just his way of trying to acquire more Bitcoin.
Yeah, or we could be forced to face the fact that he's set in his ways. He can't change, and it forces us to question our strategy. Like when we have a friend, there's a really high time preference, and we know he's kind of stupid, and we could arch him really easily, but just because of his propensity, it's almost like being an addict. Somebody easily gets addicted. You can't give him one cigarette unless you're prepared for him to become addicted for the rest of his life. It's like if you worship Trump, there's just no way around it. Shitcoining.
Well, people don't get addicted to cigarettes. It's just like I think that's like a misunderstanding. It's like what they're getting addicted to is their brains functioning at a normal level, and like.
But then some of those people go on to smoke pipe tobacco, and that's like you give somebody some of the cigarettes, you think they're really cool, and then they show up to the party and they embarrass you because they're smoking pipe, like they think they're crazy.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. Like I feel like most Americans, their brains don't work properly, right? Like there's these issues with these. They call them mental disorders, where like people are like so afraid that climate change is coming for them that wow, this is a rabbit hole that we could get in for sure, which is I was just about to tell the audience about this rabbit hole of the weather manipulation and the politics happening right now around climate change. We saw some of that happen this week. There was another hurricane in Florida. There was some interesting stuff happening in Tampa with a guy in a sailboat.
Like I would tell you, it's hard to know what to think again, because it's you hear so many theories, and then you see so many theories that fall apart. They say that they talk about this hurricane and what caused it, and then they say it's going to be really bad. It's going to be Category 5, and then it hits Tampa. It doesn't even. It's not even like it barely. They do on the boats ride. You know what I mean? It's like everybody freaked out, and they didn't have to freak out.
Well, I wonder if climate change made this hurricane less impactful, because that's like one of the things that's unfortunate about climate change is it doesn't go both ways. It doesn't just create catastrophes in the sense of making the weather worse, but it also at times makes the weather significantly better.
Right. Yeah. Like you did 75-degree days in New York City in January, and it's kind of hard to rally support to pay higher taxes to make it colder in New York City in January. And it's kind of crazy. Like, who wants to be like, yeah, I want to do that.
But I don't know. The weather manipulation is definitely a topic we'll have to look more into. I mean, you could to some degree argue that smoking is a form of weather manipulation because you're essentially putting carbon into the environment, which makes the trees healthier.
Right, and is all of it a psyop to ban Bitcoin mining?
That is a very interesting theory.
Are we are people falling for it?
I don't know. I mean, this is why the world needs Dennis Porter. They need to understand that Bitcoin mining is the only thing keeping renewable energy alive other than your tax dollars. And this is like the free market opportunity to fix the climate change. Like, Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin in general will ensure that Al Gore will never make another climate documentary. And that is something I think the world needs and wants.
I don't, maybe we could save this for a discussion for another day, but I haven't thought enough about it. But I heard somebody say the other day that Dennis Porter is bad because someday the CIA is going to use all the selfies he took with politicians to blackmail those politicians. But I didn't understand what they meant. Like, I don't understand why having a selfie with Dennis Porter could be used as blackmail.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why taking a selfie with Samson Mao could be viewed as blackmail, because he does have a tendency to wear tethered t-shirts at inopportune times. And just being associated with that could be kind of rough, especially if you're in the compliance ecosystem, because I think, if you're ever trying to work with Coinbase in the future, or Circle, or these PayPal, these groups with competing stable coins, they might not look too kindly on the market competition of you being affiliated with Samson.
Right. It'd be like you might have a really good meme, or you might have a really good post on Twitter. And then, somebody when Elon Musk makes a good point, and somebody puts replies with a picture of him and Diddy. It's like you might make a really good point, or you might be celebrating a big success for your company or your podcast. And then somebody reminds you, 2 years ago, you took a selfie with Samson now, and it looks like you're supporting Tether.
Yeah. And I think, Tether has kind of been a little bit of a Trojan horse for the industry of, presenting this idea of using dollars to make Bitcoin stronger.
It's like this is the easiest way to get Bitcoin into this community. Yeah. And then as soon as you do, 2 seconds later, USDT comes flooding now. And that's what everybody's using.
I mean, Tether ruined Pacific Bitcoin. They almost canceled the Orange Wedding.
Europe kicked them out for their. Europe was like, these people are worse than the gypsies. We're kicking them out. So what's USDT? What's Tether going to do now? They're going to have to focus harder on the global South and on the United States.
Yeah. I mean, Europe's a pretty big market, and that definitely was.
Europeans are terrified of volatility. They are just it's like you're like an anxious dog. You just shakes, and you even move the muscle, it fucking flinches and it runs off. It's the idea of volatility, or like a difficult decision or a risky decision. Europeans just raised the white flag, like the French in in World War II.
Which doesn't make sense to me.
They love stablecoins.
It doesn't make sense to me, because Europeans should be based, because they tend to consume cigarettes much more than Americans in some extent. But
they're most based. The people who smoke the most cigarettes, they unfortunately, they all were sent to die in war against Russia. All the only people that are left behind are people who are like, hey, don't fuck with me. I'll use your custodial solution. I'll buy your negative yielding bonds.
Well, I wonder, it'd be interesting to get kind of the rates of how many Europeans have transitioned. They've taken it upon themselves to, implement these very strict climate policies, right? And I wonder if, part of the issue of why Europe is full of such betas is that they transitioned away from cigarettes to vapes to try and be more climate cautious.
Here's what I think it is. I think nobody in Europe has an air conditioner. And they, like, if you, there was a heat wave, quote unquote, in England this summer, and the people were passing out and just like miserable. And it was the equivalent of like 72 degrees Fahrenheit in England. They are so afraid of climate change because they don't have air conditioners. They need air conditioning.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too bummed out talking about Europe. Because, I don't know.
So
It's
I
kind
think
of
of
like,
the Bitcoin miners, yeah.
we don't want to spend too much time punching down. You know what I mean?
Right.
All right. So, before we transition to the boost, so I wanted to talk about our performance on Wavlake over the last couple of weeks.
That's no reason we forgot to mention to be bullish at the top of the podcast.
Yeah, so the Bugle's been dominating Wavlake. So my song, Typical Politician, has been trending #1 for 6 days. Your song, Girls on Spaces, has hit a resurgence. And
apparently it's being played at Pleb Lab.
Getting played at Pleb Lab. It got posted on Stacker News. It started trending again. It got to #2 at the time of recording. It's currently at #4.
Well, thank you guys for helping me follow Matt Odell's advice of staying humble, because you guys have been humbling me with your appreciation for our music. And before we get to the boost, we'll finish the thing with Wavlake, but after you do, go into the Rabbit Hole recap conversation.
Yeah. I mean, Rabbit Hole recap was talking about our musical skills. They were talking about, the Bugle's impact on the industry. They were talking about what we got going on. And, the exciting thing about the way that we do our journalism is that any sort of reach and success that we have is because of our audience.
100%.
So, the way that you trend on Wavlake is essentially you have your audience members boosting. The way that you trend on Fountain is you have your audience boosting. The way that you trend on Nostr is you get people engaging with, your posts, whether it be zapping or sharing. And it's very different than, the kind of like PodComp fiat way of doing podcasting. So I just like to say a big thank you to our audience and, just say that, we're being recognized as the most credentialed podcasters, journalists in the industry. Like the PodConf circuit is seeing us, and I think they're recognizing us as equals, but it's only because of our audience. We don't have...
Yeah, it's a grassroots movement.
Yeah. We don't have sponsors to pump us and shill us, and throw money at us. It's all
being
it's
attacked
all
by our one sponsor we had for like 2 episodes. Did not work out, thankfully. Blessing in disguise. But they're like an anti-sponsor. They're costing us money.
Yeah. And at the same time, like I think like they're showing to our audience why our journalism is valuable. Because people are hungry for an alternative to PodConf. They want something interesting. They want something more meaningful. They have listened to Anthony Pompliano for years and just have gotten tired of the shilling. They want objective journalism that only those with a bachelor's degree can offer.
100%. And honestly, like I've said in the past, we like to see other people, and there are underworld misfits is part of the intellectual Silk Road, part of this movement. Planetary Radio is another one, but we need you to join us in this movement and as being this alternative. And if you have feedback, let us know how we can improve. But I think better than feedback is to just be the alternative out there that makes forces us to stay on top of our game, so that we can put out content as valuable and as interesting as when you point out, that you starting to, like I say a million times, there can never be too many Bitcoin podcasts. The tide lifts all boats.
Yeah. I mean, people have a choice on what they want the future to look like. Do they want it to be ruled by HR departments? Do they want it to be determined by those who don't smoke cigarettes? Or do they really want something brighter? When I think of the bright orange future, it's not just about people interacting with Bitcoin, but as you can notice, when you're smoking at night, the tip of your cigarette lights up all orange. And imagine there being 1 million smokers standing in a field, all with their cigarettes lit in the middle of the night, the orange glow that would come off that field. Like, that's what I want you to recognize and to realize, that like PodConf just does not offer that.
Yeah. Think of PodConf as Gotham City, and think of that little orange light at the end of your cigarette as the Bitcoin signal, as as the lighthouse. So anybody in your vicinity, when they see that light out, they know they're not alone.
Yeah. When you light a cigarette and you listen to a Bitcoin podcast, you are the light on that hill, projecting a bright orange future to the rest of the world. Who
setting
not,
an example. Yeah.
Exactly. And without people like that, nothing will ever change.
Yeah. Before we get into the base, I wanted to say that not everybody wants to put themselves out there. Everybody wants to start a podcast. Everybody is a good orange pillar, but they want to contribute. And a lot of people, especially this day and age, they think that, well, one of the most common ways to help people, to help a cause, to further a cause, is to donate to charity. But charities are nonprofit. It's a corporate structure designed by the feds. It's a 501c3 corp. And it is designed for the sole purpose of compliantly money laundering. It doesn't help people. If you want to help somebody, donate to a Bitcoin podcast. Boost it on Fountain. Or start your own. Don't donate to charity.
What if the podcast is a 501c3? What do you do then?
You don't do that. It's a more costly. It'd be like spending more to mine Bitcoin than you have to. It's like, I want to pay more for energy. You're paying more. You don't need a 501c3. If you boost a Bitcoin podcast with a non-KYC wallet, it's on. I mean, that's tax deductible. Nobody knows that. You don't have to pay taxes on that. And if you have, depending on how your podcast is boosted, and how that split is set out, you could launder that. That's a secondary objective. A Bitcoin podcast primary objective is helping people. For a nonprofit or a charity, it's helping people maybe is on the list, but it's down the line further below money laundering.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things I would ask you kind of with this line of thinking is, why should our listeners boost us if they're already having trouble affording taxes?
Well, if you're having trouble affording taxes, the only way to fix that is to acquire more Bitcoin. And the best way to do that is to listen to more Bitcoin podcasts. So sometimes you have to spend money to make money. If you want those podcasts to be available to you to help you afford your taxes, they need your support.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that really, changes the game with Fountain, which is kind of interesting, is I've noticed when I was listening to podcasts this week, on a fair amount of them, I was actually earning as I was listening. I was boosting more than I was earning, but I think this is like the first time you can directly correlate any sort of monetization of listening to a podcast. and it turning into a profitable endeavor. You know what I mean?
Right. Like time is money. The time you spend listening to Bitcoin podcasts, that's also money. So not only you can earn Bitcoin, you can earn generational wealth just by improving your life, improving your situation, and listening to thermodynamically sound content like Bitcoin podcasts.
Yeah, it's very cool and interesting. But yeah, I think we should get into the boosts. The boosts are, like I said, they're the most important part of the show because they allow us to trend on Fountain and get recognized by other people.
And they pay for our cigarettes.
Yeah, and they pay for our cigarettes. They pay for Kaylee, who is a vital part of the show. Yeah, our first boost of the day is from loyal booster and controversial figure Miss Hodleknot 420 for 20,000 sats, and she says, "It's so nice to see free market solutions to climate issues pertaining to war."
Yeah, honestly, we talk a lot about the negative consequences of war, and we talk about the negatives of war. But there's so many that it kind of gets buried down here. The obvious, because wars are managed by governments, and governments are so inefficient at everything, including managing a war. I mean, think of how much money, the U.S. government spent fucking in Afghanistan with no positive results. Think about what a private corporation, how they could have done that better. It doesn't even have to be like a mega corporation. Like you can have non-state private actors like the Uzis or Hezbollah. They are able to wage war at a much lower price point because they're just much more efficient. There's just so much less overhead and bureaucracy and baggage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the free market solves everything. I think it's reasonable to say that the free market will be the one to solve climate change, and is actively resolving all the climate emissions coming from war.
At the end of the day, free market is just a legacy term for Bitcoin.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this should be the serious question in Americans' heads. Like, I think the kind of collective consciousness is being raised as a result of so many people interacting with Bitcoin. People's IQs are getting higher. They're smoking more. They're consuming less seed oils. They're getting, sunlight exposure, like, normal people. One of the questions that's coming to mind is, people are no longer asking the question of like, who will build the roads without government? They see that. They see how much commerce Amazon participates in and how vital roads are to them. We're starting, it's becoming more obvious, but they're asking now of, questions like how will the free market offset all the emissions from Israeli missiles and Iranian missiles?
Right. That is also one of the biggest roadblocks to hyper-Bitcoinization that a lot of people have always noted is that how do you pacify your population and be able to conduct high level, just commerce and function of your society if the people are pacified with like television, and easy, cheap food, but without, government controlling, the infrastructure for the internet and streaming services, you wouldn't have things like Netflix. But now with Lightning, like Bitcoin fixed it, so now you don't need the government to manage it. You can just run Netflix on Lightning, and you can smooth the volatility of that fiat to hyper-Bitcoinization, Bitcoin standard transition, by making sure people still can watch TV.
You just made me think of something. So you said Netflix on Lightning. That made me think of, you remember the company Impervious?
Yeah.
Have they shipped a product yet?
No, I just heard the name, but I had not heard of anybody using it, or, if they had a product, I would assume somebody would have a promo code, an affiliate code to be on a podcast, and I haven't heard that, so I have to assume no.
Yeah. That's kind of strange. I've been surprised they haven't shipped a product yet, because there was so much hype around them. They had some speaking slots at the conferences a few years running. But yeah, I mean, maybe there's still a market for Netflix on Lightning.
Well, yeah, I think we're just early. People, just to be early and get that ability, you'll probably have to run your own Lightning node. I know we're preaching to the choir. If you're listening to us right now, if you want your friends to be able to do it, you're going to have to teach them how to set up a Lightning node. The next is, it's, probably our main front of the show, Rock Paper Bitcoin Podcast, Fundamentals, 10,000 sats. Bugle, not part of HBO documentary. That makes it irrelevant, uncredentialed journalism. A lot of times Fundamentals has it's been pretty adversarial. He's an adversarial podcast, but sure. But I think that we've really become good friends with him. He's got a great podcast, and he is finally aligned with our incentives, and he understands the value of the credentialed journalism that we put out there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think to get offended that we weren't included in the documentary. I think they definitely could have covered us as being an important part of what's going on right now, but I don't know. I didn't take it personally.
I think the Senate filming that years ago, they could have started filming that before, the bingo was even launched, but I think it probably inspired some more people who think like me, Len Sassman or somebody else is Satoshi, so they're going to try to make a cooler, better Bitcoin documentary. And I'm confident we'll be included in one of those.
Yeah, I know when they put out a documentary stating that Kim Jong-un or Dennis Porter or Satoshi, they'll definitely reference us because we've been the premier.
It's just a matter of time.
Like, the problem, the edge that we have over other
well, no, just fail off.
Well, like a lot of these other credentialed news agencies, like, they're scrambling. Their journalists are scrambling to try and figure out, just the basics of Bitcoin. They don't staff people at the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal that have been listening to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week. At least not yet. Like, I haven't seen a single job posting on Bitcoin or jobs for any of these credentialed news agencies. And so our relevancy will just be, continue to be seen through the test of time. Every block that ticks by, we're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of our competitors at these other news agencies. So I think I'm not particularly worried about it. I mean, we're a platform that launched in
if you're
pretty recently.
If you're worried about that, just my advice is lower your time preference.
Yeah, and if you want to ensure we're in the next Bitcoin HBO documentary, then boost us. Because that's like how our reach is determined.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
only go as far as we're boosted.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, I appreciate the boost. I appreciate the thought. It's good to see that people are, kind of recognizing us as being important enough to be included in this, this point of Bitcoin history where HBO made a documentary. Do you remember the days when, like, people were just like excited about any sort of mainstream adoption?
Right. It's like Eve Bagliano was on the CNBC live stream that you could get on Yahoo Finance on Tuesdays on the second page. And it's like, damn, dude, second page of Yahoo Finance pop. And now, Sailor's on the View like every other week.
Yeah. I mean, what's it mean when, Bitcoin's going mainstream, and instead of us bitching about, safety and not being on Rogan, we're bitching about how HBO didn't cover the Bugle. Like,
Right. I was telling you earlier, forest for the trees. It's zoom out. There you go. Zoom out. Think back to 2019. Somebody like the Bugle would not even be mentioned in the same echelon as HBO. And now we're talking like next HBO special better out of them, or it's not relevant.
Yeah. I mean, I'm bullish on the future. Like, I think there's like a high potential that you and I one day could moderate a presidential debate. Like, imagine if we moderated.
On Zap.stream. Instead of CBS or Fox News, we're doing it on Zap.stream.
Yeah, the Bugle presidential debate between Mark Zuckerberg and Dennis Porter.
It's we say one day. A lot of times we take that and means like some vague thing in the decades in the future. Like we could literally be talking about the next election.
We are talking about the next election.
Oh yeah, and absolutely,
100%. 2028, baby. Bugle's going to moderate a presidential debate. Just get ready for it.
That wouldn't even be the 100th craziest thing that happened in the past 4 years.
No. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we should definitely like do bingo cards at some point. I would have Donald Trump signing Kaylee's breasts at some point. I think that is a high potential.
Repealing all cigarette smoking bans in public.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that happening by 2030.
That's true.
Well, we have a choice. We all have a choice on what we want things to look like in 2030. It's why does this like one group of people get to have a 2030 agenda and we don't?
Right.
Like, do we want the future to be based or do we want it to not be based? Like, I think we want it to be based. We want people to be smoking. We want people to, like, if you're seriously concerned about the emissions from smoking, you have to either budget it into your emission allotment or you have to buy carbon tokens. And if you've been saving in Bitcoin, a few Satoshis worth of carbon tokens to cover your cigarette smoking it's not going to be a big deal to you. You're going to be, full.
You just said it right there.
Yeah.
Offset your taxes, offset your carbon credit costs by smoking cigarettes.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you for the boost, Fundamentals. Appreciate it. Next boost is from Open Mic 7777 SAS, fun number. Says Bugle Mile High Club zaps again, and then a airplane.
I was just talking to in the group chatting with one of our buddies, our listeners, Rob Hamilton from Anchor Watch, and he's behind all his Bitcoin podcast listening, but he's been enjoying the Bugle Mile High Club on his flight to Australia here coming up. He's pretty glad that we can provide him content on that really long, shitty flight.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's when you're on airplanes, it's such a clear example of like how we can have a better world, right? So like you're sitting in a box in the sky, and they don't want you smoking. They don't want you drinking your own alcohol. They just want to, put these arbitrary restrictions on you. They want to, hassle you and scan your face. And it's almost like they're trying to make it as difficult to be a cypherpunk as possible during the travel experience.
Yeah.
And, listening to the Bugle, we're presenting such a different view of the world in which Bitcoin has already won. And I think it just helps it to sink in a little bit more. Like it makes the stuff we're saying make more sense. So I think the airplane is the perfect environment to be listening to a Bugle podcast.
Absolutely. Our next based is from our buddy Rayo. He says, this is 5,000 sats. He says, cheers from the Free Republic of Paznia, P-A-Z-N-I-A. Hope the legendary Richard Greaser performs at Vanu Fest someday. Talking about your music, of course. But thank you so much, Rayo. I want to ask you, Richard, like Bitcoin and like voluntarism and these other libertarian adjacent, subcultures. Sometimes, if you're not familiar with them, you'll read a sentence or you'll read a post and you'll be like, I have no idea what any of those words mean. But can you explain what is the Free Republic of I don't know if I'm saying it right, Paznia and Vanu Fest? What's he referring to there?
Well, unfortunately, I've yet to travel to Vanu Fest, but Vanu Fest has been happening for a little bit. So essentially what Rayo's doing is he's creating a decentralized citadel of like-minded people. So, he understands that we live in this, age of the internet, and that he's really trying to uphold cypherpunk standards, of not allowing the world to be ruled by, intelligence agencies and tech companies that allow for you to have no privacy and can just steal your stuff. And so, Vanu Fest is essentially, the celebration of that idea. Rayo's been doing, some really cool stuff for a while with the podcast, longtime Bitcoin podcaster, as well as book salesman. So Rayo is also a publisher and has a website called Liberty Under Attack. And that's actually how I was introduced to Rayo, a long time ago, because I was looking for based books, and Rayo had some based books on his website. And so, Rayo is actually, been working with him, definitely consider him part of the intellectual Silk Road, and
totally.
I'd love to perform at Vanu Fest. I mean, I think, there's people that have talked about the hypotheticals of a citadel for years.
Right. He's like a pioneer.
Well, he's not just talking about it; he's doing it.
Right.
And I think that's what sets him apart from, a lot of people in the industry that just kind of want to talk through the hypotheticals.
Kind of like he's like a pilgrim, modern day pilgrim. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to culture jam adversarially with people like Rayo. And if you're interested in anything that Richard just kind of talked about and would like to learn more, you should definitely check that out. In fact, if Richard, you remember, include a link to Rayo's website, in the show notes.
Yeah, I definitely will. You can buy digital copies, which just means that you can download the files from my albums that I published on Spotify on Rayo's website. And I'll definitely be publishing more music over there in the future. But it's just a way to, once again, help the Bugle, help the intellectual Silk Road. But appreciate Rayo. The website, I might forget to put the link. I shouldn't, but it's libertyunderattack.com. Pretty easy to find. I think there's a Paznia website too, if you want to look at the Free Republic.
Yeah.
What is that? Just Paznia.com? Let me look it up. Free Republic. Paznia.com. Paznia.com. But yeah, thank you for the boost, Rayo. Our next one is from Saverud, 5,000 sats, and says, environmentally friendly warfare is the way forward. Any thoughts on NATO's climate impact under the leadership of Jens Stoltenberg? Will we see a shift now that the new General Secretary being from the Netherlands? That's an interesting question.
Go ahead.
Well, my initial thoughts on it is, I think there's some pretty base people from the Netherlands. There's something there's something that just makes you based about wearing wooden shoes. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And really, like, it's just crazy. The two best kickboxing cultures in the world are Thailand and Netherlands. I don't know why, but maybe I should look more into that. Like, they're really cool and they kick really fucking hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see it by the farmers and their protests. There's something that the Dutch government really failed to understand is, they need to make their farmers rich, and then any sort of climate concerns they can just offset with carbon credits,
Right.
and let the free market resolve the issue.
Yeah, like one of the things that is probably just good general advice is I lost my train of thought. I'm stoned. Never mind. But yeah, Netherlands, interesting country. Based farmers, lots of dikes, the continental water back. Look at them. Not the lesbian.
Yeah,
The only thing that's weird though, the only thing that's weird about the Netherlands is like men are named Jen. I always think of Jennifer, but that's actually a male name in Netherlands. Holland, as they call it.
They don't pronounce it in some funny way. They don't say Jan instead of Jan.
Maybe like that's how like Jan Pritzker would spell his name if he was from the Netherlands.
Like, I wonder if part of it. So, like, one thing interesting I learned from the HBO documentary is that Samsung's company Jan 3 is named that because of January 3rd, which is an important date in Bitcoin history. And I wonder if the Dutch started calling, their men Jan in reference to January as well.
Interesting theory.
Because that would be incredibly based. If it's base enough for Samsung's company to be named it, maybe it's base enough for the Bitcoin men to, have a seemingly girl name.
Yeah. Thank you for the boost. Our last boost, it's from, when you guess it, 8 Mile. 801 sats. I feel like in addition to a lot of orange pilling going on in the bomb shelters, talking about Dennis Porter, and people just having orange pilling conversations while they're shielding themselves from the Iranian attacks, there would be a lot of people selling steel punch seed phrase backups. After all, if you can't sell them to people whose homes have been wiped off the map, who are you going to sell it to? Thank you once again for the captivating discussion, and God bless. And that's a good point. If you are selling like doomsday scenario, seed phrase backups, things that can survive apocalypse, nuclear war, it's kind of tough to sell that when the economy's fine and like there's, Israel's keeping peace in the Middle East. But if you go to these kind of like these gravity wells of volatility where there is conflict that is kind of isolated to protect it from spreading and affecting the economy in the rest of the world, there is a risk of hypersonic missiles, targeting you to raise the price of Bitcoin to fund some of these efforts. If you can survive, you can't guarantee that your house or that your hardware wallet is going to survive. That's why you need these sturdy, anti-fragile backups, so you can still access your Bitcoin when you get assigned your refugee country, and you get there, you get access to the internet.
Yeah, I know. Some people like try to flex and they memorize their seed words, but
you don't want to risk shell shock from water causing you to have memory loss and not being able to remember your seed phrase. So they're not just trying to destroy your hardware wallet physically. They could be just trying to concussion grade in your vicinity and cause you to forget your memorized seed phrase.
Yeah. That could be a tactic to essentially make Bitcoin more scarce. Like I know I personally would prefer my seed phrase written down, because you never know when you're going to have a crazy night on Sailor's yacht, and potentially forget those important words that are
and you can never be sure that your hardware wallet's not going to explode at this point. We live in a world where you have to at least calculate the risk of that being true.
Yeah. I mean, we have to come to grips with this reality that Israel is very powerful, and they understand technology very well and have the potential to blow up your signing device. So
yeah. Hey, Lyle, always appreciate the best. Always appreciate the insight or the your thoughts on some of the important credentialed journalism that we work so hard at the Bugle to provide. Yeah, man.
Well, yeah, wrapping up, I just want to shout out our listeners, people that are boosting the show, people that are sharing the show, because essentially, sharing an episode is kind of like boosting in a way, where you're increasing the reach, you're increasing the pool potential for people that will boost us. And it's how we win,
Yeah, and the past couple of years, the word booster has kind of gotten a bad rep. But Bitcoin podcasts like the Bugle and some of the other high signal podcasts on Fountain, we're taking the word back. We're making the word booster positive again.
We're making boosting great again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, anyways, thank you for everybody for tuning in to this week's episode of Bugle Weekly, and we will catch you next week.
Bye.
Smoke is hanging over the steeple. Inside there are a bunch of base people, lighting cigarettes like there's no tomorrow. Laser eyes show no signs of sorrow. A wedding podcast to be shared with the masses, shared with the world to prevent it from burning to ashes. Kaiser is standing at the altar with Sam by his side, waiting impatiently for the entrance of the bride. Everyone gasps as Natalie walks down the aisle. On her face is a beautiful smile. The women begin to cry, the men gasp a sigh. A moment more scarce than Bitcoin supply. The bride approaches the altar with lasers in her eyes. As she approaches, the groom fills with pride. A dynamic duo, both macro and looks. A wedding that's destined for history books. Bitcoin is one, the weddings are like this. Parking royalty and influencers with wits. To become one divided by 21 million. Price is about to rip to over $1 trillion. They kiss, then they laugh, and the crowd stands to clap. Someone posts a picture to Nostr in order to get zapped. Marriage is a multi-sig where you share the key. Decentralized love, glowing wild and free. He'll hollow her forever, he whispers in her ear. She holds him tightly without any fear. Secure together, this is proof of work. Blocks ticking in just like clockwork. The bride approaches the altar with lasers in her eyes. As she approaches, the groom fills with pride. A dynamic duo, both macro and looks. A wedding that's destined for history books. Bitcoin is one, where weddings are like this. Parking royalty and influencers with wits. To become one divided by 21 million. Price is about to rip to over $1 trillion. It's a good day for an orange wedding. Their love's so strong, there's no pretending. A marriage to further Bitcoin reach. The history of money instead of a best man speech. Bitcoin is one, the weddings are like this. Parking royalty and influencers with wits. To become one divided by 21 million. Price is about to rip to over $1 trillion. It's a good day for an orange wedding. Their love so strong, there's no pretending. A marriage to further Bitcoin reach the history of money instead of a best man speech. Bitcoin is won when weddings are like this. Podcast royalty and influencers with wits to become one divided by 21 million. Price is about to rip to over $1 trillion.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Bugle Weekly. We'll see you next week.